The question is simple: why was her body cut with such precision? It's the detail that haunts everyone. It's the detail that turned a horrible murder into a dark American legend, the Black Dahlia. Her real name was Elizabeth Short. We have to remember that. She was a person, not just a puzzle. But the puzzle is what's left, and at the heart of it is that cut, a perfect bisection at the waist. To understand the cut, you have to understand the scene. January 15th, 1947. A woman walking with her child in a vacant lot in Leimert Park, Los Angeles. She saw what she thought was a mannequin. It was white, waxy, and broken in the middle. But it was not a mannequin. It was Elizabeth Short. Her body was posed, her arms were raised above her head, her legs were spread, and she was cut clean in half. There was no blood at the scene. Not a drop. The body had been drained completely before it was moved. The killer had also washed her. It scrubbed her clean. He then drove her to this empty lot and left her there for the world to see. It was a performance, and the mutilations were horrific. Cuts on her thighs and breasts. Pieces of flesh removed. But the most famous wounds besides the bisection were on her face. The killer had sliced her mouth from ear to ear, creating a grotesque permanent smile. A Glasgow smile. This was pure rage, pure hatred. It was meant to dehumanize her, to turn her face into a mask of horror. So, we have two things happening. We have the wild, slashing anger of the cuts on her face. Then we have the cold, methodical bisection of her torso. It's a strange contradiction. One looks like frenzied passion. The other looks like a medical procedure. The idea of surgical precision entered the story almost immediately. The first reporters on the scene, the first cops, they looked at that clean cut and thought, a doctor did this. It looked too neat. Too knowledgeable. The media ran with it. Surgeon killer on the loose. It made for a great headline. It created a specific kind of monster in the public's mind. Not just a brute, but a brilliant, educated madman. A Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But was it really surgical? That's where things get complicated. The official autopsy was performed by Dr. Frederick Newbar. He determined the technique used was something called a hemicorpectomy. It's a procedure where you sever the body at the lumbar spine between the second and third vertebrae. It's not just hacking through flesh. You have to know where to cut. You have to navigate around bone. The killer did it with very few nicks on the vertebrae. He knew his anatomy. But Dr. Newbar and other experts who looked at the case files over the years noted it wasn't a perfect surgical cut. A surgeon in an operating room would use specific tools and techniques to minimize tissue damage. The Dahlia killer's cut was more like a highly skilled dissection, or the work of a butcher who knew exactly how to joint a carcass. The edges of the wound were a little too rough for a scalpel. He likely used a large knife, not a surgical instrument. So surgical precision might be the wrong phrase. Anatomical precision is more accurate. The killer knew what he was doing. He had a plan. He had the skill to execute it. This wasn't a lucky guess. This tells us a lot about the man we're looking for. First, he had knowledge. He had to. This rules out 99% of random attackers. A killer in a fit of rage doesn't stop, consult a medical textbook, and perform a hemicorpectomy. This was a deliberate post-mortem act. The rage part of the murder was over. The torture, the killing, the facial mutilation, that was the explosion. The dissection was the calm, methodical cleanup. Or maybe it was part of the ritual itself. So who has this kind of knowledge? Doctors are the obvious answer. Surgeons, general practitioners, medical students. They spend years studying the human body. They cut up cadavers. They understand the map of our insides. But the list is longer than that. A veterinarian, a mortician, or an embalmer's assistant. A butcher. Anyone who worked in a field that involved taking bodies apart, human or animal. Second, he had a private space. This is a huge clue. You cannot torture someone for days, kill them, drain their body of blood, wash them, and then cut them in half in a car or a public park. This took time, hours, maybe days. Elizabeth Short was missing for about a week before her body was found. The coroner determined she'd been dead for about 10 to 12 hours when she was discovered. This means the killer held her captive somewhere. He needed a place where no one would hear screams. A place where he could perform his gruesome work without interruption. A house, not an apartment with thin walls. Maybe a basement. Some have theorized it could have been a defunct medical office or a mortuary. A place with the right tools and drainage. He needed plumbing to wash the body and dispose of the blood. The lack of blood at the scene and on the body is one of the most chilling details. It speaks to a level of control and forethought that is terrifying. He cleaned up after himself. And third, he was organized and intelligent. This was not a sloppy, impulsive crime. It was a project. Think about the steps. Abduct the victim. hold her captive, torture her, kill her, drain the body, clean the body, mutilate it in specific ways, bisect it. Transport two separate, clean pieces of a human body in a vehicle without leaving a mess. Drive to a residential neighborhood, place the body parts in a deliberate pose, and then vanish. This person was a planner, he was confident, he wasn't afraid of getting caught. In fact, he seemed to want the attention. After the murder, someone claiming to be the killer started taunting the police and the press. He mailed a package to the Los Angeles Examiner. It contained Elizabeth Short's belongings, her birth certificate, social security card, photos. The items had been cleaned with gasoline to wipe away fingerprints. Again, a smart, careful move. He also sent a series of cut-and-paste letters made from newspaper clippings. Here, her I.S. Dahlia's belongings, one note read. Letter to follow. This points to a killer with a massive ego. A narcissist. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted credit for his work. He saw the murder as a masterpiece, and he was the artist. This posing the body was for an audience. Sending the letters was a way of taking a bow. This is a classic sign of a certain type of serial killer. They feel superior to everyone, especially the police. They see their crimes as a game, they are winning. So, let's put the profile together based on that clean cut. We are looking for an intelligent, organized man. He has a private space where he can commit murder without being detected. He has anatomical knowledge, likely from a medical or related profession. He is sadistic, taking pleasure in the torture and mutilation of his victim. And he is a narcissist who craves attention for his crime. He is controlled and methodical, yet capable of extreme rage. A man living a double life. Someone who could appear perfectly normal, even respectable, to the outside world. This profile helps us understand why the investigation was so difficult. The police weren't looking for a common thug. They were looking for a ghost, a man who could move through society unnoticed, hiding a monster inside. Over the years, dozens of suspects have been named, but a few fit the profile better than others, largely because of the anatomical precision question. The most famous suspect is Dr. George Hodel. His own son, a retired lapdad homicide detective named Steve Hodel, became convinced his father was the killer. The evidence he compiled is extensive and, for many, persuasive. George Hodel was a brilliant physician who ran a venereal disease clinic in Los Angeles. He was highly intelligent with a genius-level IQ. He lived in a large, distinctive house in Hollywood, the Sound House, which had plenty of room and privacy. He was part of the surrealist art scene, friends with people like Man Ray. The way Elizabeth Short's body was posed, some believe was a nod to Man Ray's artwork. Hodel had the medical knowledge. As a doctor, he would have known exactly how to perform a hemicorporectomy. He had the private space, he had the intelligence. Did he have the dark side? By all accounts, yes. His family life was filled with accusations of abuse and incest. He was known to have wild parties, to be involved in orgies, and to have a sadistic streak. He was a prime suspect in his own secretary's death, which was ruled a suicide but looked suspicious. After the Dahlia murder, the lab actually bugged George Hodel's house. On the tapes, they heard him talking to himself. He said things like, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." It was incredibly incriminating, but for reasons that are still debated, they never charged him. He eventually moved out of the country and lived in the Philippines for many years. Steve Hodel believes his father was a prolific serial killer, responsible for many other murders in Los Angeles and Chicago. The Dahlia was just his most famous work. For Steve, the precise bisection was his father's signature, a display of his surgical skill and his contempt for humanity. It was a way of saying, I am a doctor, a god. I can take life apart and put it back together as I see fit. Another suspect who fit the medical profile was Dr. Walter Bayley. He was a surgeon who lived just one block from the vacant lot where Elizabeth Short's body was found. He had a degenerative brain disease that was causing him to become mentally unstable and violent. His own daughter accused him of being the killer. He had the skill, the location, and a possible motive of mental breakdown. He died shortly after the murder, which could explain why the killer suddenly stopped sending letters and never struck in the same way again. The case against him is much thinner than the one against Hodel, but he remains a person of interest for some investigators. Then there are other, less direct possibilities. What if the anatomical knowledge wasn't from a formal education? Mark Hansen, a nightclub owner, was an early suspect. Elizabeth Short had stayed at his home for a time. He was a former field surgeon in World War I, which could suggest some medical training. Leslie Dillon, an associate of Hansen's, became a major suspect for a while. He was an aspiring writer who seemed to know a lot about the murder. He once worked as a mortician's assistant, which would have given him the anatomical knowledge. The point is, the precision of the cut is the single biggest filter we have for suspects. It narrows the field dramatically. It forces us to look beyond the usual suspects and consider people who occupy positions of trust and respect in society. But why do it at all? Why not just kill her and dump the body? Why the elaborate, risky process of bisecting her? This goes to the psychology of the killer. The act of cutting the body in half is the ultimate act of depersonalization. It reduces a human being to mere parts, an object. The killer was not just destroying Elizabeth Short's life, he was destroying her very identity as a whole person. He was taking her apart, literally. This suggests a deep, profound rage against her specifically, or against women in general. He wanted to degrade her in the most absolute way possible. The bisection also served a practical purpose. It made the body easier to transport. A full human body is heavy and awkward. Two halves are more manageable. But this killer was not primarily a practical man. The posing of the body, the clean state of it, these were not practical moves. They were theatrical. So the bisection had to be part of the theater. It created a shocking spectacle. A body cut in half is a fundamentally more disturbing sight than a body with a gunshot wound. It's unnatural. It breaks our basic understanding of what a person is. The killer knew this. He wanted to create the maximum amount of horror and revulsion. He wanted to shock the city of Los Angeles. And he succeeded. The Black Dahlia case caused a media frenzy unlike any before it. The city was gripped by fear and fascination. The killer, wherever he was, must have been enjoying the show. He was the director. There's also the contrast, the wild slashes of the Glasgow smile and the clean cut at the waist. This duality might reflect the killer's own mind, a person at war with himself. One part of him is a seething pit of rage, uncontrolled and violent. This is the part that tortured and killed her. The other part is cold, detached, and methodical. The part that has to clean up, to arrange things just so, to maintain control. It's the public face and the private monster, the surgeon's clean hand and the butcher's bloody work. Maybe the cut was his way of imposing order on his own chaos. The murder itself was messy, passionate, and out of control. But the aftermath was all about precision. Draining the blood, washing the skin, making that perfect cut. It was a way of reestablishing his own sense of power and superiority after a chaotic, violent release. He was tidying up not just the crime scene, but his own psyche. So why was the Black Dahlia's body cut with surgical precision? The answer is not a single thing. It's a collection of reasons that build a profile of one of America's most elusive killers. It was done with precision because the killer had anatomical knowledge. He was likely a doctor, surgeon, medical student, or someone in a related field. This was his area of expertise. It was done to depersonalize the victim, to turn Elizabeth Short from a person into a grotesque object, an assembly of parts. It was the ultimate expression of his power over her. It was done for shock value, to create a public spectacle of horror that would captivate and terrify the city. It was a statement piece, and it was done, perhaps, as a reflection of the killer's own fractured mind. A mind that contained both uncontrollable, violent rage and a need for cold, methodical precision and control. The body was a canvas, and he painted a portrait of his own madness on it. The cut is the killer's signature. Without it, the murder of Elizabeth Short might have been just another tragic, unsolved homicide from the 1940s. But that clean, knowledgeable cut elevated it. It gave the killer a name, even if we don't know his real one, the surgeon. It created a specific kind of fear, the fear of the monster who looks just like a normal, educated, successful man. The man who holds the power of life and death in his hands and decides, one day, to use it not to heal, but to destroy. The case has never been solved. The files are cold. The killer almost certainly died of old age, taking his secret with him. All we have left are the facts of the crime scene, the posed body, the Glasgow smile. And that cut, that clean, deliberate, terrifyingly precise cut. It's the question that starts every conversation about the Black Dahlia, and it's the clue that brings us closest to understanding the man who did it. A man who, for 1 week in 1947, held a city in his grip and then vanished forever.